Stray Cat Lee Rocker on tour, solo tour, early in 2024. So anyone going to your show, describe it. What are they going to see?
Well, let me tell you, I've really put together a concert that I've been doing in performing arts centers around the country and other theaters. And it's a concert, but it's more than that. I really get to play my hits from my Stray Cats days and since then, and music from really throughout my 40-year career. But it's more than a concert. I've got a video screen, and I get behind the music and tell some stories about life on the road for these years and what it was like to tour with the Rolling Stones. And there's a lot of video that goes on and still photos. So it's a concert, but it's much more.
Were there any stories, not that you're going to necessarily describe them, but were there any stories you're like, I'd love to tell this, but maybe not on the show?
Well, yeah, a lot of crazy stuff has gone on over the years, but I do talk about a ton of it. And my career it's been really amazing. I'm really fortunate who I've gotten to tour and work with, in addition to my own Stray Cats stuff. From touring with the Rolling Stones, as I said. Keith Richards played on some of my solo records, and I'll drop a little story about that actually. Back in the mid '80s, I did a band called Phantom Rocker and Slick, and it was myself, Earl Slick, who was David Bowie's guitar player, and my drummer, and we invited Keith Richards to play on this. And so one night we hear a knock on the door. It's Electric Ladyland Studios in New York, and I look out the peephole, because it's the '80s in New York, and Keith is standing there with a Fender guitar with no case in one hand and a black alligator bag full of medicine in the other. And we just take it from there.
That's so... Gosh, I'm trying to think of something that would be even wilder than that, and I'm trying to picture just Keith Richards walking up to the door. But then again, that also seems like Keith Richards would just walk up to the door like, hey, I got a gig. I'm going to do it right now.
He did, and the funny thing about it is, no one ever told me, halfway through, I'm going, how the hell do we pay Keith Richards? How does this work? And he made his intentions kind of clear at the end of the night after we finished the bag of medicine. He walked up to the coat rack, took my custom-made leopard jacket, put it on, and left. So that's... Keith gets paid by leopard jackets, apparently.
Did you ever see him wear it at a gig somewhere? Like, that's my jacket from the...
I've seen photos.
Very well. I mean, at least you got your claim to... You got a second claim to fame right there. He's on stage with the Stones. Who would you have most wanted to work with? Anybody?
Well, I've all of my heroes I've been lucky enough to play with, from Willie Nelson and John Fogerty. George Harrison was someone I really loved and was a pal, and just happy I got to make some music with him. Ringo Starr as well. But there's really been an incredible list, and one of them is really the architect of rock and roll. I spent a tremendous amount of time working with Carl Perkins, and Carl wrote Blue Suede Shoes. I mean, that probably wouldn't be an Elvis if it wasn't Carl Perkins there. And we toured together, we recorded together, we even did the soundtrack to Porky's Revenge together, so those roots go pretty deep. Yeah,
and I remember Carl Perkins worked a little bit with Paul McCartney, even back in the early 80s.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, that influence was, I would imagine there's probably a good number of, not the diehard Beatles fans know everything, but I'm sure there's probably a good number of casual ones that don't know that influence of American blues and rock and roll, that particular genre, that avenue, the Perkins style that made its way across and back across over the ocean a couple times.
Yeah, well, that really is, that he was the king of rockabilly, and that's really how I came up with Stray Cats. Myself and my two partners, we really based a lot of what we did. We put a modern twist on it, but on rockabilly music that was from Perkins and Presley and Cash, and and I'm still doing that. That's my music and the essence of what I do.
Do you think that the Stray Cats could given the style of the rockabilly echoes at that time, think circa 1980, 81, when they're starting to really break big. Could that have happened at any other time post 1950s? Was it a thing that it just happened to be a receptiveness of music at the time, or could this have happened in 1995? Could it happen in 2024?
I think it could happen anytime. I mean, it's American rock and roll, and yeah, we broke in the '80s because the band had everything. I mean, we just had this power, and still do, that is just kind of undeniable. But I think the form of music is always so valid. It's the fabric of America. It's those rhythms and those sounds, and it's about people playing real instruments and not machines and not synthesizers. So there's just a legitimate art form there.
I suppose, especially given it at the era, and I'm thinking back to when I was seeing Rock This Town, Stray Cat Strut on MTV, early '80s, and in context with everything else, and I know there was plenty of genres. It's not like everything was going drum machine synthesizers. A lot was
Sure.
still every type was out there, but it was not the type. It was not the stereotype of what was happening. And I mean, it sounds '80s just because it was a hit in the '80s, but you could plop that song, you could take Rock This Town to '73 to be a hit there too.
No, for sure. And and there was maybe a receptiveness at that time. It was sort of the end of the punk era as well in the UK when we got there in the summer of 1980, and rockabilly music, it really is the original punk rock in so many ways.
Mm-hmm. How's your take on it, I guess, evolved over the decades, having played this now and developed new songs around it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you find yourself developing your own, I guess, form of rockabilly or 50 style rock blues? You start to put your own imprint, obviously, because you're a creator as well. How would you describe how you do it?
Well, I always looked at it as not a museum piece kind of thing, not something that you just, take the dust off it and recreate it. You've got to add to it, and you've got to put your own stamp on it, and your own originality, and new songs in new ways. I mean, just different chord progressions, lyrically, some different things. But you really, you need to make it your own, just as if the blues artists need to do that. Stevie Ray Vaughan put his take on the blues, something that's been around, and it's really very similar in that way.
What's the key to writing that? Again, you're writing your own music, and I'm thinking back to some of your solo material going back to 2021. But you're not trying to write a pastiche, but this is the kind of music that you like to write in. How do you know when you're feeling authentic in writing something that's okay? This sounds like it, and trying to get that narrow form between doing a copycat versus also being too different or challenging. What's the when do you know you got it right?
You don't. You just kind of have to feel it, and when it feels right, it is right. I mean, it's a hard thing sort of to define. I was thinking about that, and it just has to be there. It's got to be authentic and real, and and the thread for me also always is, does it work on my upright bass? And that's part of that's building block one, and that's part of the DNA that's always runs through everything I do.
How has your bass playing evolved over the years in your technique?
Well, I think I always strive to get better, and it's funny. I've been playing bass for, I'm afraid to say, but more than about 50 years at this point, almost. And it's just infinitely interesting to me. And I'll come up with something either by mistake or intention, and I'll be like, wow, how did I not play that before? Or how did I not think of taking that direction with it before? So it's infinite, and it just I get so much joy out of it and fascination out of the actual instrument and the role of the upright bass in my rock and roll. And it's sort of slap bass, and it's so I'm dealing with the low notes, making the band sound good is always the goal, and a lot of percussion with the slap part of this. So it's almost like being a bridge between the drums and the other instruments.
Was there ever a point where you felt like you had, I mean, not, maybe mastered's the right term, maybe not, because we're always evolving and learning our techniques no matter what, but was there a year in your career where you went, all right, I'm doing the 10,000 hours thing, like I've got this and I'm still going to build, but I know it, this is it?
I don't know what year. I started super young playing music, so I think I got those 10,000 hours way early. I started, both my parents are classical musicians. My dad was the solo clarinet with the New York Philharmonic for 60 years. Mom was a music professor, so at about, the one rule we had in the house was that you played an instrument, you took lessons, you learned to read and write music, which I did. And I did that by starting on cello at about 7 years old. So, probably by the time I was 12, I was pretty adept at playing cello. And then, really discovered rock and roll, fell in love with rock and roll. And that's when I moved over to electric basses and upright basses.
Mm-hmm. And have you ever thought, and I reference the big hits because that's what most people hear, and so of course they lock those bass lines in, like they're locked into my head the way you played on those recordings. Have you ever thought, if I could go back to the studio, I'd play that line a little different?
Yeah. At times, and then other times you go, no, that's the charm of it there. But yeah, you can always second guess yourself, like, oh, I could have went up an octave there and done something a little different. But the early records, I think, have some real magic to it, and they are photographs, and they are a snapshot in time, and what I was doing and what we were doing and thinking, and it stands the test of time. I mean, man, Rock This Town and Stray Cat Strut. I mean, everywhere you go, you're hearing these songs.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite Stray Cats song to perform, and what's your favorite solo song to perform?
I would say, I love Rock This Town. I got to say, that's the anthem. But there's a song, Runaway Boys, from the first Stray Cats record, and that was really written about us leaving New York. I was still 17, going to London, and the onset, the start of everything, sleeping in Hyde Park. We had all-night movie theaters, and it just brings me right back to those days. So Runaway Boys and Rock This Town for the older stuff, and I'm loving, for the newer music, I'm loving some of the stuff from my last record, Gather Round. So I would say that track, Gather Round, the title track. And, I was telling you a little bit about the show, so I've really cherry-picked songs from throughout my career and interactions I've had with people. And one of them was I got a call from Levon Helm a number of years ago. He's passed away now. Levon was, of course, the voice, the singer for the band and the drummer. Songs like Up on Cripple Creek and The Night That Drove Old Dixie Down. So Levon invited me up to his barn to do a thing called the Midnight Ramble that he was doing every Saturday night, doing a concert up in Woodstock, New York. And ever since then, I've been doing a version of Ophelia, and I talk about that. So that's another favorite, but there's just a lot of stories and anecdotes in every song that I'm doing with you guys, the Pablo Center, and at other concerts. I've got a connection with that I get to talk about and perform.
A couple more questions before I let you go. What, in your entire career, what's your favorite music video that you've ever been a part of?
Ooh, that's actually a good question. I would say Sexy and 17 was a video for a single that was out in the 80s that was all over MTV, that we shot in New Orleans in an abandoned school, and it was really just kind of amazing, fun, and a little bit spooky kind of thing.
I remember seeing that video. It actually took a while before I saw it. I think I just like stopped having MTV or something like right about the time it was popular, so I didn't see it until many years later. But I mean, that was a top 5 hit still. That was like your, what was it, third top 5 hit in a row? I'm trying to remember if Stray Cats Drug went top 5. But that at least third top 10 hit in a row.
Yes.
That one doesn't get as much play as the other two, and I mean, I don't exactly know the reason why, but it's stuck in my head right now as you're mentioning that. I mean, do you have any rhyme or reason? Have you ever been able to figure out over the years why the other two songs they stick? That one went as high in the charts. It didn't stick. Can you figure that out?
No, you can't. And the only thing that I would say is a song like Stray Cat Strut to essentially. I think we're one of the few bands that's almost a theme song, and there's really not that many bands that have done something like that. I mean, there's a fictional band, the Monkees, for instance, but I think that connected on so many levels, and part of it was that.
Well, the last question has to do with something hopefully new to come. Is there anything new you're working on in any musical project whatsoever, or are you are just focusing on the tour and the upcoming Stray Cats, whatever is coming down the road? Is it just live stuff, or are you planning anything in the studio?
Well, I am definitely getting in the studio soon. Got a couple of songs ready, and we'll definitely have a record out within the next 12 months, for sure. And in terms of working on things, I've got my Lee Rocker tour. And then in the summer, we do have the Stray Cats going on tour for the first time since 2019. And we'll be doing about 20 shows all over the USA.